Hello, this is Carlton Doe with IBM. I am also the host for today's IIUG technical webcast featuring JC Lengyel. Today's topic is the newly released Informix 14.10xC6 overview of new features and functionality that has been released. This meeting is being recorded. A replay will be posted on the IBM Informix community website. For questions, JC has asked that we wait until the end of the session for those. You can go ahead and post them in the chat area to all participants. At the end of the session, we'll pick those up. Before we get going, obviously we need to do just a little bit of advertising here, so here's the first one. The announcement of the IIUG Worldwide Conference will be held on October 5th through 7th of this year. It will be a virtual event. There are 3 half-days planned of hour-long technical sessions. There will be keynotes, there will be tutorials that might last half days and so forth. And in addition, with your paid subscription to the event, the new 1410 certification badge exam will be available. It has been completely rewritten and updated for 14.10 functionality, so you can be one of the first to take that exam. Registration and agenda information will be coming soon. You'll find it on the IIUG website, through the Insider. Look for some email notifications and so forth. And finally, a shameless plug for 2 webcasts that I'll be conducting next week and the week following. Where JC's presentation today is just a brief overview, I will have 2 sessions that go into a technical deep dive where you will see syntax and screenshots and what to do, what not to do, best practice type guidance and so forth on all of the features that JC will talk about today. So without further ado, today's presentation is being given by JC Lengyel. He started with Informix back in about 1991 in the support organization. After a few years there, he moved into development, working primarily on performance features, kernel features, and so forth. He is now the chief architect for Informix, so if there's anything you guys really want to get into the product, he's the one you need to pester. And he's also the lead engineer for the kernel group, and is just all around a great guy. If you haven't had the chance to meet him at any of the Informix conferences, when we go back to in-person meeting, JC's definitely somebody you need to sit down and say hello to. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to you.
Thanks so much, Carlton. Hi, everyone. I'll be honest that I would prefer to be seeing you in person. It's a lot more fun to see everyone at one of the IIUG conferences, and I really hope that we start in-person stuff again soon, but I guess this will have to do for now. XC6 is a fixed pack. It does contain a lot of small to medium-sized features that might be of interest to you guys, some of which wouldn't exist in this presentation if not for the IIUG conference in Redondo Beach that we had. That was the most recent one. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but there were a couple of requests that were made in that conference that actually ended up here. Thank you, IIUG. XC6 does involve conversion. You will not be able to do rolling upgrades to XC6, but Nagaraju has made conversion of a cluster a lot easier recently, and so hopefully it won't be too bad, but it will require some downtime to go to XC6. So today, as Carlton said, is a kind of a 10,000-foot view. I'm not going to be giving too many specific details, so I apologize if the information today seems a little bit lacking, but part of the point is just to give you a summary of what's in the release so that you can then have questions you're ready to ask Carlton for his sessions, which are on the 22nd and 29th. I hope you'll attend those. So the first feature that I want to talk about is probably one of the bigger ones that was done. This was done by Gustavo Castro, who is the head of the bar group. Backup on RSS. It is now possible to, not just an external backup, but to take a real backup with on-tape or on-bar on an RSS node. We recommend that this kind of and you can take log backups. We recommend that this archive and these log backups be used primarily for rebuilding the RSS node if that's necessary, partly because an RSS node can be behind the primary in terms of the logs it's applying, and we won't back up the current log on the RSS node because that would require advancing the log. The log backups on the RSS node will always be a little bit behind the backups on the primary if you're doing backups on the primary, which we do recommend you continue to do. If for use as an archive that could rebuild a primary, it's not ideal because there may be some transactions you miss if you're not backing up on the primary as well. But that's not really an issue on the secondary because you can rebuild the secondary and then connect to the primary and logs will be sent over to resync any missing log. It is possible in an emergency to use this archive and these log backups to recover a primary, but we do recommend that you at least take log backups on the primary, if not archives. That's, like I said, one of the larger features. Another feature that did take a fair amount of coding and testing was one by Nagaraju that improved ER performance pretty much across the board. It's kind of hard to describe where you're likely to see the benefit of these performance improvements because they're everywhere. Anything that involves a lot of ER throughput and needs low latency is probably going to benefit from this feature. There were all kinds of optimizations that were made in the existing design to reduce overhead, a lot of parallelism. There were latching choke points that were pretty much eliminated by the parallelism by creating multiple queues. It was sort of akin to what Nagaraju did with the fast recovery and the log recovery code last year to improve the performance of that. So if you are using ER extensively and you have any performance issues, I have a feeling that XC6 will make you happy. This feature was tested pretty extensively in the field by Skybet and Siomex, so thank you to both of them for helping to verify that the feature works and performs well. This is a feature that was, I think, requested by Paul Watson. It's not a huge one, and even he wasn't sure it was critical, but he did request it. The syscdr database rarely gets corrupted or out of sync across the nodes, but if you want to do a consistency check between the catalog data that's on various nodes in a cluster, this is a new command that will allow you to do that. And you can choose which catalog you want to be the reference catalog, whether it's the master servers or another node, a target node. This is a feature that was coded by Jonathan Leffler. It was, there's a banking requirement that auditing information needs to go to the Syslog daemon. And so this doesn't affect the auditing that you're currently doing. If you're doing auditing to the normal audit files, that can be done in parallel to this. But this allows you to fork off the auditing information straight to the Syslog daemon through POSIX calls, POSIX compliant calls, I should say. You can differentiate between servers in the messages because you can configure an identifier on a per server basis, so every message has that identifier. And the way this feature is configured and activated is through a bunch of new on-audit command line options. There probably more than you will need. You can slice and dice these messages in a bunch of different ways. You can filter out ones that are just informational and focus on others that are more important, et cetera. But again, the auditing that you're currently doing should not be affected by this feature. It's just an add-on. There is currently a feature that allows you to tell your RSS server that you want it to do non-blocking checkpoints when the primary does non-blocking checkpoints, which can be helpful because you'll do less log staging and records on the secondary will be able to be processed faster if we're doing a non-blocking checkpoint there. If there is a blocking checkpoint that's done on the primary, that will pass that information to the secondary as well, and the secondary will block, but as usual. But with this RSS non-blocking checkpoint configuration parameter that's in XC5, you can tell the secondary that you want it to do a non-block when the primary does. And this has been extended to an HDR secondary now. And so RSS non-blocking checkpoint, that configuration parameter is still in XC6, but it'll be deprecated in the future. We now recommend that you use SEC for secondary non-blocking checkpoint for either RSS or HDR, and to stop using RSS non-blocking checkpoint. In the case of HDR, we completely disable log staging internally when we're doing a non-blocking checkpoint on the HDR secondary, because we do not expect any problem with records getting backed up. Sometimes when you're doing a blocking checkpoint on the secondary, even though you've done a non-blocking on the primary, things can back up to the point where even the primary is blocked from sending log records. So this is an important feature. This was requested by Flutter, I think, and I think Patty Power was nice enough to test it for us. That was excellent. Thanks to you guys if you're here. Onstat-G LAQ. LAQ stands for log apply queues, and this pertains to the performance improvements that Nagaraju did for secondary log apply and normal roll forward after an archive log apply, and even fast recovery. This command has existed for a while, but now there's a lot more information there about what the LSN is for the various apply threads, what the apply rate is, and there's extra information there in that command on a secondary. Temp tab no log. This was a prudential issue, I think. If you set temp tab no log to 1, that means that we will append with no log syntax to any create temp table or select into temp statement that you run, which means that we'll favor temporary DB spaces if they're in DBSPACETEMP. We'll try to send those tables there. But if there's only normal logged DB spaces in DBSPACETEMP, we will create the no log table there, but we won't log any of the DML that's done on it. And typically, you'll want to have that set to 0 on a primary because you'll want to be able to do rollbacks on work that you do on temp tables, et cetera, on the primary. But on a secondary, you'll want to set this to 1. Otherwise, if you just use create temp table syntax and you don't specify with no log, you might get a syntax error. You might get an error saying, you know, we can't do that on a secondary, or there's no place to put that temp table, because it's trying to create a logged temp table, and it can't do that in the only spaces available on a secondary, which are no log temp spaces. So typical configuration is temp tab no log is 0 on a primary, it's 1 on a secondary. But then if you promote the secondary because you've got some kind of a failover, then your applications may start failing unless you change that configuration but quick. So now if you want to set temp tab no log to 2 on both the primary and the secondary, then you're covered. We will, you know, that's the equivalent of always being 0 on a primary and always being 1 on a secondary. And so there's no need to change that configuration parameter if you get a failover. Okay, I think B&H Photo requested this one. Thanks, you guys. DBSPACETEMP traditionally has only supported a list of spaces that had the same page size, and now it will support a heterogeneous mix. I do recommend that you have at least one temp DB space in the list that's of base page size, especially if you ever do warm restores. Pronto ran into an issue recently where all their temp DB spaces were 16K page size, and they wanted to do a warm restore, and they couldn't figure out why their root DBS kept filling up. And the reason was because we have to put temporary logs somewhere, and we can't write temporary logs to any DB space that isn't base page size. So if root is all we got for base page size, that's where we're going to have to go. Now they can put a base page size space in DBSPACETEMP along with their 16K page spaces and get the best of both worlds, basically, and they won't have to worry about a warm restore or filling their root DBS up. That was, oh, by the way, that was coded by Stephen, who's a relatively new kernel engineer in the Pune office. Thanks, Stephen. This was coded by Jeff McMahon in Olathe. A little view in the sysmaster.sql script, a view on sysptn header. And that sysptn header pseudo table already contained a session ID and the number of pages that were NP total for the partition. So this querying on this view will show you all sessions and how many pages they're using. Now, when I started to test this recently, I realized that number of pages in temp DBSpace isn't necessarily the most helpful stat. So we'll also give you kilobytes in a future version, hopefully XC7. So with this session, you can figure out, with this view, you can figure out which sessions have are using how much temp space. Query timeout was requested by, I think, both SkyBet and B&H, and query runtime might have been a Prudential Singapore request. Now in XC6, onstat-G, SQL, and SES will show you clock time elapsed for any query. It won't become involved with DML or administration type operations, but straight ahead queries will show how much clock time has elapsed since we began running the query. That thread may have been swapped out and other stuff might have happened in the meantime, depending upon how busy your system is, but we'll show you the clock time that it's been taking. And you can use a session environment variable called query_timeout to limit how much clock time any query can take. You can set this for every query, or you can set it and forget it, but it is at the session level. We decided not to make this at the instance level because that seemed like too much. If a query times out, it'll just behave as if you Control-C'd at the client. It'll get an internal interrupt and it'll report that the query was interrupted. Here's a good example of something that wouldn't be here without that IAG conference in Redondo Beach. There was a new engineer in the Informix group at that time who was at that conference called Gaurav Kumar, and he's, I think, currently in Pune. And he mentioned that he had a customer who, the Smartblob cleaning, which happens after, if you have a bunch of Smartblob spaces and you boot your server, soon after you go online, we will scan all the Smartblob spaces in series. It used to be in series, checking for stray large objects, which can happen if the server gets a root shutdown and you're in the middle of doing a bunch of non-log LO operations. And we'd like to scan these spaces every time we boot just to make sure that we clean things up, even though it's kind of a rare case. But it was taking a lot of I/O and taking a long time because they had large Smartblob spaces and they were all being done in series. So he asked if we might be able to do that work in parallel, and we said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So that's what this feature does. You set a new configuration parameter called sbspace_cleaners to a number of threads, and that many threads will be fired off after the restart to clean Smartblob spaces in parallel. If you set it to 0, we won't do any cleaning. So we don't need this ifx_lo clean off environment variable that was probably undocumented. We don't need that anymore, so that's been completely removed. If you're using it, please, and you don't want Smartblob space cleaning after a boot, then just set sbspace_cleaners to 0 and you're good to go. So this is another thing that SkyBet asked for because, okay, let me go back. If you're using auto-locate, there are a lot of things that feature does, but one of the things it does is it allows you to add round-robin fragments to a table on the fly if the other fragments run out of space. Either the DB spaces are full or they've reached their maximum size. You're trying to do an insert and your round-robin table has no room in it for whatever reason. With auto-locate set, you'll automatically get a new round-robin fragment added, and the insert will go straight in there without any fuss or muss. But once let's say you had 10 fragments initially and you added this 11th fragment, it's now empty. The other ones are full to bursting and can't take any inserts, so it makes no sense for us to do round-robining at that point. We should favor the fragment that has no rows in it until it catches up with the others. And auto-locate did this automatically. There was a request for that functionality, that favoring of the fragment with the least rows in it, even when people weren't using auto-locate. So that's what this feature does. And it's actually the default behavior now. So for round-robin tables, by default, we will now favor, in terms of inserts and loads, the fragment that contains the least number of rows. And we'll generally keep fragments within 100 rows of each other. We don't look every single insert because that would be a little costly, but we do batch things in batches of 100. And I did that one. Okay, so this guy, Jeff McMahon did for Sportsbet, I think. You could call this a bug or a feature. It's somewhere in between. If you have a round robin table that has some in-place alters that increase the size of a row, for instance, and all the current fragments are full, and you try to do an update on one of the rows that's going to increase the size of the row to the point where it can't find any space in the current fragment, we were not doing a good job of automatically migrating that row to a fragment that might have room. Now, and we were giving you a 131 or a 136 error just for an update, which didn't make sense, because you might have fragments that were perfectly fine in terms of the amount of space they had available, but the one row you were trying to update was in a fragment that had no more space. Now, thanks to Jeff, that row will get shipped off to a different round robin fragment in the same table, one that has space, and you shouldn't get any errors for it. This one I did with Vladimir's help for Hyatt Hotels. There's a segment on AIX, there's a segment look-aside buffer that does memory address translation, and it gets inefficient because of the number of entries. It's a relatively small number of entries in the buffer. I think there are only 12 entries for segments. And you don't get this feature, AIX feature large segment aliasing, unless you align your shared memory segments on 1 terabyte boundaries, which we're not doing by default. You could probably set Shimbase to a 1 terabyte boundary, but as soon as we allocated the second segment, we wouldn't try to align that on a 1 terabyte boundary automatically. And on Power 9 hardware and the newer versions of AIX, this was a noticeable performance problem, especially if you got a bunch of segments, if you had over 12 segments and they weren't aligned. Then over time, performance would really degrade. So you now in XC6 have this new configuration parameter called AIX_LSA. It's only applicable to AIX. If you set it to 0, you'll get the default behavior. If you set it to 1, then we'll turn on the feature and all your shared memory segments will be aligned on 1 terabyte boundaries. That doesn't mean that they will be 1 terabyte in size. They will be the same size they've always been, but there'll be gaps between them if they're not, if they're smaller than 1 terabyte. Just aligning them on 1 terabyte boundaries really helps the address lookups. And if you're trying to reduce the number of segments that you create, you can set AIX LSA to 2, and you'll get the same functionality you got with a setting of 1, but we'll also combine the resident segment with the first virtual segment into 1 large shared memory segment. So you'll save 1 in that way. I do recommend, if you're using Power 9 hardware and a late version of AIX, to turn on AIX LSA for XC6. So this one was coded by Amol who was another relatively new kernel engineer in Pune. For a while, we've had this, I think since early 14.10, we've had this last lookup scan value in onCheck PT for index partitions. You could see, which was helpful if you wanted to see whether your indexes were being used at all. If you never scanned from an index, and you ran onCheck PT on the table or on the index partition itself, you'd see that the last lookup scan was either a long time ago or there was nothing there. And you could potentially remove the index or redesign it or whatever. That same element of the partition structure was not being used for data partitions, so we are now using it for essentially the last modified time. I think it's described in onCheck PT as last DML time. You can also get this in SMI, but it's stored, its granularity is in seconds, its number of seconds since the epoch, typical Unix time. So if you query it in SMI, you're going to get a Unix time. You're going to get an int. But in onCheck PT, it'll show date and time when you last modified the data partition. Here's another one that wouldn't be here without IUG in Redondo Beach. So Art Kegel was at that conference, and he mentioned to me something I didn't know at the time, which was that IFX row ID, which is a pseudo column in every table. You may not know about it. Whether you're using fragmented tables or non-fragmented tables, you can always select IFX underscore row underscore ID, and it will show you, the type is LVARCHAR, and it's decimal fragment ID colon decimal row ID. Can't use hex in there, I'm afraid. And this has been around for a while. It wasn't very useful because if you tried to select with an I is equal predicate, we would do a sequential scan of the entire fragment, if not table, to find that guy. So not all that helpful. Now, if you run the kind of select statement that I've shown here, where you're selecting a particular row based on IFX row ID, and it's an is equal filter, we'll go straight to the row as fast as we would if you were using row ID for a non-fragmented table. So thanks, Art. That was a good little suggestion. There have been a couple of Informix HQ improvements, not a ton, but you now in Schema Manager can create and drop tables. That was kind of an obvious oversight, I think, but you'll be able to do that now. And there's some ability to customize the event logging for both the agent and the HQ server, and there are a couple of other things. Carlton probably will have more specific details on HQ's improvements in his talks, but there are a couple here that are worth noting. I'm not sure who coded those. This was Dave's project. We now support TLS 1.3. There's one wrinkle. GSKit clients can't currently use FIPS and TLS 1.3. If they're using FIPS, we'll default to 1.2, assuming that you've got that in your TLS version config parameter. But we recommend that you turn off FIPS mode for GSKit clients using this environment variable, ISI GSK FIPS mode. Set that to off, and then you'll be able to use TLS 1.3 with the server. If you don't set TLS version in your config file on the server side, it will still use 1.2 as the default. ODBC and other clients are not affected by the FIPS issue. It's just GSKit clients. This is something handy that's more internal, but we now are able to rebuild sysmaster with any fixed pack, starting with XC6. Now, XC6 has conversion, obviously, but XC7 probably won't. So if we decide we want to make changes to the sysmaster schema or add functionality there, we'll be able to do that even for XC7 if it doesn't involve conversion. We highly recommend that you don't create tables you care about in the sysmaster database, because we do drop and rebuild it fairly often. I mean, certainly anytime you do conversion, we're going to drop and rebuild it. I'm assuming nobody is doing that. Anyway, if you upgrade to a fixed pack that doesn't involve conversion, but you notice that sysmaster is rebuilt after your first boot, this is the reason why. We've got some schema change we wanted to make, some functionality we wanted to add. And that's nice because we think of these things all the time, but we have to usually wait till a conversion fixed pack or a major release to get them in there. So that's it. Carlton, if you wouldn't mind reading me any questions that have come in, I'll do my best to answer them. But do remember that this was meant to be kind of a teaser, so I may not answer in tons of detail.
Thanks. There have been no questions that have come through.
I think I was just being so scintillating that people have kept them till now. We'll give them a couple minutes.
You have two options of submitting your questions. One is in the chat box. You can send it to either all participants or to the host and presenter, which JC will then see. Or if you have the participant tab open, you can raise your hand, and then I will open your microphone, and you can ask over the line that way. I'm not seeing anything other than people saying thanks, great presentation. I'm not seeing anything.
I see something from Santanu. Traditionally, the certification exam is provided free to the attendees at IOG conferences. Being IOG 2021 will be virtual. Would you still offer a free 14.10 certification exam?
So I mentioned that at the very beginning when I was doing the little advertisement for the user conference. Yes, the badge will be available as part of your paid registration for the virtual conference in October. And yes, the PowerPoint will be available for download along with a audio and visual replay of the.
Besides the TLS, supporting TLS 1.3, I mean, obviously there are security defects that we have fixed, but those will remain anonymous. I can't think of any other major security features that are in XC6 besides TLS 1.3.
Unless you want to count the auditing to Syslog, which could be considered as a security feature in that it gives you more auditing capabilities.
Sure.
As Colonel's asking if timestamp of the statement was cached, it's not so much that the statement was cached, but timestamp that's coming up is how long has that statement been running, and then you can decide whether you want to cancel it manually or you can put a timeout boundary around that. And I'll go.
So I'm guessing Colonel is wondering if he could look at history. Could you see how long queries have taken in the past? And we do not have anything like that, but it's an interesting point.
Mike Hoffman is asking for round-robin fragment balancing. Doesn't that eliminate the whole purpose of round-robin? As JC mentioned, if you implement this feature, your round-robin fragments will only be off by 100 rows or so at any moment in time once they all catch up. And you'll see when I do my presentation, you'll see that I create a series of 2 and 3 fragment tables and I load them with data. And you'll see that eventually 2 of them fill and then the third one's behind and then eventually the third one fills up and then they stay balanced from there forward.
Yeah, the point of that is to balance things as soon as possible. So once the fragments are caught up to each other, then you will get pretty much true round robining. But it didn't seem to make sense to me to do true round robining if you've got a fragment that's essentially empty. I'm guessing you'd want that to get caught up with the others, and then you'd have a real even spread. There's a question about the CDR group threads always waiting for a mutex. Are they always waiting for a mutex, or are they always waiting for a condition? If they're always waiting for a mutex, then they must be getting hammered. Hi, Vincente. I don't know the answer to that. I guess Carlton and I could talk to Nagaraju about that one and maybe get back to you if you just tell me quickly, is this because of load or are they just literally always, even in idle state, waiting for a mutex? Wow. Okay, well I don't know the answer to that, so we'll have to get back to you on that.
As far as column level encryption, no, there haven't been any changes there. And in truth, we, IBM, have been strongly discouraging the use of column-level encryption. There are a number of risk factors associated with it. Specifically, you could have, if you encrypted a column and it exceeded its row length, you would get truncated data within that row, which is not a good thing to have happen. So we have been encouraging table encryption either through the earlier database encryption expert or now the full encryption at rest functionality, which takes entire DB space and encrypts it, and you don't have to worry about column length issues. So I don't think we've done, and obviously you can correct me if I'm wrong, JC, I don't think we've touched column level encryption in a number of years.
Yeah, we definitely are recommending people not use it anymore and use encryption at rest if possible. Whatever cipher we're using, whatever method we're using to encrypt columns is ancient now. So it's better than nothing, but I wouldn't consider it nearly as good as encryption at rest. And encryption at rest, it performs well. You should not see a major performance degradation or even a noticeable performance degradation with it. So that's what we're hoping you'll go to.
Well, very good. Thank you for your time and attendance, JC. Thank you for an excellent presentation. As I mentioned, deep dives start next week on the 22nd and the 29th. If you haven't registered for those, go to the IIUG website. So
and I really hope to see, I really hope to see more of you guys soon. I'm hoping that we'll get a chance to travel more this year and maybe have an in-person conference soon. That would be a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carlton.